Hello, Quality New Mexico partners, and welcome to your August Pep Talk. Pep Talk stands for Performance Excellence Pursuers, and this monthly webinar is your exclusive benefit of being a partner of Quality New Mexico. We appreciate our partners. About our talk today, the topic is the City of Fort Collins World-Class Formula. Great culture plus great strategy equals great results. And our guest speaker is Terri Runyan. She is the Performance Excellence Program Manager with the City Manager's Office of the City of Fort Collins, Colorado. And the City of Fort Collins is on a Baldrige-based excellence journey and has been very successful with that. Terri has over 27 years of experience working in organizational and leadership development. She's an examiner for the Rocky Mountain Performance Excellence and serves on the 2016 Board of Examiners for the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award. Currently, she's working for the City of Fort Collins and leading their Performance Excellence World-Class Journey. The city has achieved RMPEX Peak Award in 2014 and is now pursuing the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award. Very impressive. Welcome to you, Terri.
Thank you, and thank you all. It's such a privilege to be here with you, and good morning from Colorado. It's a beautiful day, sun is shining, and we are very excited about our journey and about our performance excellence quest and what we've learned through the years. A couple of things I'd like to mention first about our strategic planning process. One is that I began working with the city in 2011, and that was the year that we submitted our application to REMPEX, which is our Rocky Mountain Performance Excellence. At the second level, we have 4 levels. I believe New Mexico does as well. And so at the foothills level, which is our second level, our 15-page application, we received an OFI, Opportunity for Improvement, around strategic planning, that we did not have a process in place. And at that time, the city felt like, well, yes, we do. And yet when the examiner asked us, how do you do that, we did not have that answer. So again, this is part of a long-term journey, and certainly the Baldrige, the questions and the criteria and the examinations and the application process all really help us immensely. The second thing I would like to say about our strategic planning process is that it is a process, and we have done a lot of great things in the last 5 years, and we have a long way to go. And it was interesting putting this presentation together and talking about where we are and being really excited about that, and recognizing that we have some work to do. So I'm excited to go through some of these slides and talk about where we are, and then I would love to entertain some questions at the end. So just to start, again, we're City of Fort Collins. We will hear in the next 2 days whether or not we have a site visit from our Baldrige application that was submitted in May. So we're walking a little bit on edge, just wondering if that's going to happen. Excited for the opportunity. So that's where we are in the quest. So what I'd like to start with today is our great culture plus great strategy equals great results. And I think a lot of you have probably heard, this is nothing new, that strategy eats either breakfast or lunch or dinner or hors d'oeuvres or whatever you want to say, eat strategy for lunch or something to that effect. And so when we talk about it, we talk about you have to have both. You really do. And so this is a slide that I use when I go out and talk about our journey and performance excellence, and I use examples of if you only have great culture, you could see it in the tone of Animal House. And so on my other slides I actually have music coming, and see if people can find out understand what that is. They had a lot of fun, they had a lot of camaraderie, there was a lot of trust, they did get some things done, but not a lot of strategy. And then the strategy piece, if you just have great strategy and not great culture, I use the example of now dishes lost. Do what I use, Godfather. Yeah, there you go. Because they had a lot of great strategy, right? They don't have a lot of culture. There's not a lot of trust. You're always looking over your back, but The Godfather is great strategy, not great culture. So you can look at things like Star Wars to be the great results. They have a combination of both, great results and great strategy and great culture. So we really believe that you have to have both of those, and I'll show you that, or I'll demonstrate that later too in the presentation. So what I want to start with is our big picture. And again, some of these slides are like, whoa, there's a lot going on here. But I think it's important for you all to know, depending on where you are in your strategic planning process, how this flows for us. So if you look at, and I know I have an arrow here that I can use, if you look at our 2013-2014 process, and then we're mimicking that in 2015-2016. So the first thing that we start with is we have onboarding for our council members, and those council members start in May. So the first thing that we do is we have a retreat once the new council members and mayor are on board, and we talk about strategic planning and talk about our strategy, and here's our 5-year view, and here's what we're planning on. What would you like to add? And so that's the first look that council gets to have with that. Then the next part is, of course, once they give us their input, then we start looking at the 5-year view, and then our BFO, which is the third bullet down here, is our budgeting for outcomes. So that's our budgeting process. So we go from the council and what their requests are, along with what we're already doing, to our strategic plan 5-year view, to our budgeting process. And that's just a process that continues every 2 years. There's then the execution part of that is that we budget, and then the programs and initiatives are implemented during the execution activity piece. So that's the flow that we continue to go through, and we have done this for the last 6 years, and it seems to be working pretty well for us at this point. So a shorter view, so to look at this 2-year view that we have on the planning calendar, 2-year planning calendar, we have odd years and even years. And so what I'm going to focus on first will be the strategic planning portion. You can see that we start with a risk assessment, a strategic risk assessment. That starts in the summer. Our capital improvement plan is another input that we use that we also start in the summer. We have a long-term financial plan that is also updated at that time. And then we ask for department inputs. So we send out an overview of here, the process. Here's the process again. They've been through this. This is their second round, so it's getting more familiar with them, and that's where the cultural piece comes in. And then we also do a community and engagement citizen survey. And then with that information, we use those as inputs into our strategic planning process. So that happens in the January-February time period. And then what you can see here also is this star shows you that that's when the council reviews the strategic plan. We call this, it's interesting, we call it, in this period in here, once we get all this information, we call it squishy work. That was our first term for it 4 years ago, because you're getting all these inputs from different departments throughout the city, and it's assessing those and saying, okay, from these, what themes are we coming up with? What are some important things that we need to keep in mind from all these inputs? So we call that the squishy work. So the guiding themes for us, some of the things we want to make sure that we were all on the same page with, executives as well as our core team that we have, is that it's intended to reflect priorities over the next 5 years. So again, if you think about, we started the process in 2015, we finalized it in 16, and we're really looking at 17, 18 as well. So it's about a 5-year process. The strategy guides decisions on what to fund within the budget. The partnerships are critical to achieving many of our objectives, even if they're not specifically called out. In our 13-14 conversation, or our 15-16, sorry, I'm trying to think of our years, the partnerships, our council want to make sure that we continue to use our city partnerships and made sure that they were involved in the strategic planning process. So that's what that one's about. We have a community dashboard that is online, and that includes metrics that were established in 2013. We've had some changes in that. And then our strategy maps, and I'll talk about those in a little bit. So those were our guiding themes for the process. The process that we use is called issues-based, and again, that's where we talk about the squishy work that happens right in this area. What that means for us is that we use citizen input and priorities, and we have a citizen survey that we send out every 2 years. We have gone to 24 different focus groups. 2 years ago, when we went through this process, we went to 12 hard-to-reach groups. We went to the senior center, we went to the high school, we went to the college students, we went to the homeless folks, we went to the Spanish-speaking only community. So we went to about 12 different areas just to get their input in a more intimate conversation about what they need from the city. This year, 2 years later, part of our improvement was that we went to over 25. And so our CPIO folks, or our community relations folks, went out and really had good dialogue and good conversations with a really broad scope of our community, and that was an important piece for us. So those are the focus groups, and then of course we have 27 boards and commissions. as well. So from those inputs, we highlighted what the citizens said were most important to us. We also have council input, and I talked a little bit about that from the retreat that they had in May when they first were on board. And then the organizational priorities were based on the city plan and master plans that we call. Our city plan is about a 50-year look. We are about to engage in our city plan process in 2017. It is a quite expensive and quite extensive process, but the city uses outside consultants to come in and really help the city and citizens and businesses, again, look at a 50-year look out. So that's our city plan. The master plans are more of a 15 to 20-year look. So those are some things that we use, some inputs we use as well. Of course, economic and financials, where are we? Where's the economy? Where's the United States? Where's the world? Emerging trends and issues, infrastructure issues, workforce trends, and then any metrics that we've been using. So those are all the things that we look at when what I call the squishy work is done in this piece. And so that's where we basically came up with our objectives for our strategic plan. So it's driven by a combination of folks. So I'm going to go into a little bit of an example. So what I like to start with is these are the what we call our 7 key outcomes. All of our strategic planning and budgeting is based on these 7 key outcomes. So we have neighborhood livability and social health. We have culture and recreation. We have economic health. We have environmental health, safety, transportation, and then high-performing government. So that's how we divide and conquer our strategic plan and our budgeting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just use one example. I'm not going to go into all, obviously, but I'd like to just show you the kind of how we walk through this. So this is actually a slide that we use for our council presentation that we presented to them in March of this year. And so what we wanted to do is say, here's the economic health key outcome. Here is a description that we promote a healthy, sustainable economy reflecting community values. And then here are some key themes around that. That it's about placemaking, it's about attractive quality, infrastructure, and then retaining and expanding our businesses. So that's our economic health key outcome area. So from that, what we developed in that next step, and this is actually a clip from our strategic plan, is that we have, again, the description on the left. We have our dashboard outcome measures, and then we have 10 strategic objectives around our economic health outcome. So improve effectiveness of economic health initiatives through collaboration with regional partners, enhance employment opportunities through business retention, expansion, incubation, and attraction, and then all the way down. And you'll notice in the bottom one, get my arrow back out here again. In this one, it's new, and so we wanted to make sure that, one, our council, and two, our citizens, as the strategic plan is online, that they can go out and see, and if they're going through this, that they know that this is a new one. And it's interesting for us in the city of Fort Collins, and you might think, identify strategies to reduce train horn noise. Why is that in economic health? And sometimes we played with where specifically objectives need to go. And because that was such an issue with our business community mainly, our downtown area has a train running right through it, which is very quaint, and we really enjoy that. And there are times when we just have a lot of honking of the train noise, and so we decided that was an objective. We wanted to work collaboratively with our partners and see how we can improve that. So those are the objectives that we have for economic health. And then the next slide, then I'm going to go back to our planning calendar and focus a little bit on the budgeting piece. So we talked about this whole piece, the inputs, the strategic plan. Now we've developed it, we've approved it through council. And now what happens with that strategic plan and those objectives is that we go into our budgeting process. And what we call budgeting is called budgeting for outcomes, called BFO, a lot of acronyms. And we have folks that request. They have budget requests or budget offers, as we call them. And so this is the process that they use for the budget offer itself. Every budget offer needs to be connected to one of our strategic objectives. So in those 7 outcome areas, there are a total of 55 strategic objectives, and each offer, when you ask for money or request money, each one of them has to be tied to at least one objective, and sometimes even more. We just went through an exercise, and we're getting ready for our council meeting to submit the budget, and we're trying to show them examples of how these budget offers are connected directly to the strategic plan. So it is alive and well for us at this moment in time, actually. So this is a sample that I wanted to show you that shows how we connect our budget offers that I just talked about to an objective. So again, we're using the economic health as an example, and you can see our 3.1 is to improve effectiveness of economic health initiatives through collaboration with regional partners. And we have 4 enhancements. Back to my clicker. So we have four different budget offers that connect directly to that strategic objective. So I wanted to demonstrate that we directly tie, and that each one of those is a direct tie. So I want to talk a little bit about the metrics hierarchy, because when we go from strategic planning to then budgeting to then we ask the question, so how are we going to measure that? One of the interesting comments that one of our council members made at our strategic planning session in March was, how do we know, as we look at this new strategic plan that you're rolling out, how do we know that you were successful in the last round? What metrics do you have to show in these different outcomes and in these different objectives that you were successful? And we just looked at them and said, well, at this time we don't. So that's part of the growing process I talked about in the beginning, that we have a lot of work to do. So our metrics right now are divided among the higher level metrics, which are our community dashboard. We have 38 metrics in the 7 different outcomes that I shared with you. Those are online for everyone to see on our fcgov.com. At the next level, we have what we call the BFO, Budgeting for Outcome Scorecard. And these are 148 metrics among those strategic objectives that I mentioned earlier. So this is an example of neighborhood livability and social health is one of our outcomes. We have 2 different community dashboard items, affordable housing inventory and then the housing opportunity index. And at the scorecard level, we have a winner count for homeless population and availability of affordable housing. So that's at a smaller level, but those feed those higher level dashboard items. This is what we are challenged with at this point, because we don't have a lot of these. We kind of backed in our metrics, and now we're saying, okay, let's step back. But that's our next round. That will be our 17-18 strategic planning process. So we're continuing to improve. And then foundational, of course, are some of those day-to-day operational measures. What indicators do we use? Like how often do we go out and count, for example, would be something that at the department level, what measure are they using in order to get an appropriate winner count? So that's just a little overview of the budget, of the hierarchy for the metrics. So what I want to do now is show you a sample of, again, we're back to economic health, and this is an example of what we call a strategy map. And so this shows you how we directly link our metrics to a strategic objective. And I know when Julio first said, hey, we'd like you to talk about strategic planning and how you make it real, how you actually use this document and make it, we call it a day in the life of our strategic plan. This is how it starts to become real for us, is that we have this, at this point, our strategy maps are only for our internal folks. It's not external yet. We have not, probably 2017 first quarter is when we'll make that available, but at this point we're still working on it, and we're still making it usable. But in this example, again, this is one of our objectives, Econ 3.2, that we enhance employment opportunities through business retention, expansion, incubation, and attraction. And so a couple of the measures that we use that link directly to that are our vacancy rates, and then also the Fort Collins job percent change. And this was our first aha as the city when we said, we don't really have good metrics to link to these objectives yet. The other aha that we had around those objectives were that they're not SMART, and that was really eye-opening when we started to really connect these metrics to that. So, and just to step back in the story and the history of this, we went to our teams throughout the organization and said, okay, we need metrics now. This was 4 years ago when we started this process. So people just kind of kept giving us metrics. And we put them into clear point and said, okay, we have all these metrics now. We've got all these metrics. And then we said, okay, well, now they have to link to the strategic plan. So then we started to kind of back those in. And they also have to link to your budget offers when you request money. What measurement are you going to use to tell us you're successful or not? So again, we did more backing in than we did thinking about what the true measure is, what do I do, and then what is the objective around that. So that's, again, the learning for us that we will continue to work on. But that's the strategy map. So the next piece of that is, okay, so we have a strategic plan, we budget for it. Now we have some measures that are associated with that. So how do we monitor it? And this, again, goes back to that cultural piece of really changing the culture. So I thought that it would be important to show you that we have our overview of how we lead and how we hold ourselves accountable. So our LPT is our leadership planning team, and that's every Monday. That includes our mayor pro tem, our city manager, our deputy city manager, our operations and 2 operations folks, and then our city clerk's office. So they meet every Monday before council on Tuesday, just to kind of talk about the issues, what's coming, what was last week, what we need to know about. So that definitely helps hold us accountable from that perspective. ELT is our executive team. So our city manager and his direct reports meet once a week on Wednesdays. SIT is our strategic initiatives team, and those are director level. Those are 60 directors from across the organization, and we meet quarterly. And our original intention around SIT was that we talked about metrics, that we talked specifically about those dashboard measures, those 38 measures I talked about earlier, and that if we were in the red or yellow, that the SIT owners, whoever those were, would talk about where we were, what's going on, what they're doing to get those back on track. We did that for about 3 years, and about a year ago, the SIT response, as we assessed that meeting, was that wasn't valuable for them to sit through other people's ideas of what they're going to do in their outcome or for their measures, and so we are changing direction on what SIT will be doing. Our leadership link is every other month, and those are 120 of our leaders, directors, and managers, and that is more informational. We have an all supervisors meeting twice a year where we have 320 folks that come together for 6 hours, and it's informational, networking, and also some learning, some leadership development kind of activities. But the QSARs are something we implemented in 2015, and they're called Quarterly Service Area Reviews. And the QSARs are where, at this point in time, we are taking the strategic plan and working it all the way down to your department and saying, what are you doing, how are you measuring it, and how are you being successful? So that is our monitoring method right now for the QSAR. I'm going to show you an example of utilities. So this is our utility scorecard, or this is a sample of a quarterly review for a utility department, and this is the BFO scorecard level. So here's an example then of what our utilities director would report to this QSAR group. And the QSAR group is our city manager, our chief financial officer, and our deputy city manager. Those 3 folks, and then of course whatever executive is in charge of that department. So utilities, for example, would be that executive would be there, and then probably 3 or 4 of his key leaders. And they're presenting to this small group of folks, here's what we're doing, here's what the measures look like, and here's what we're doing about them, as an example. So in this example, again, this is electric, this is our SAIDI in minutes, and you can see it's a little bit small on the screen, but you can also see how we did really well for a while, and then we fell off for several quarters, and that reflects here in the yellow, did not have a good quarter, and then are back on track. So the conversation with these leaders is, here's what happened, here's our measure, here's why it happened, here's what we're doing about here's what we're doing about it to get it back on track. So that's what those conversations are about, and they happen for each service area. There are 24 meetings that happen every year. So every quarter, every service area presents. The internal folks, we call it internal services, and that would be our HR, IT, our communications, CPIO, and finance. They do it together. So there's one internal, and the rest of them are more focused, like utilities, police, and some of our other service areas. So here's the next level of service area of metrics. This is the BFO level. So it's that second level that you can see up here of the a level down than the high level of the dashboard items. So a couple of examples here, again, for utilities are about decrease in our climate-wise partners for greenhouse gas emissions. We also have our residential annual water demand in gallons that we watch. And then another one is the overall water conservation program effectiveness. And this is one of the things that we recognized as we start to gather metrics and we look at our programs and services, are how do we know they're effective? And so as we start to measure those, put some metrics in place, that is helping us understand that. And so this is a new one. You can see we've only done it for a couple quarters, and I'm not sure what the dialogue was around that conversation about these programs and their effectiveness, but we are looking at that to say we want to make sure we spend the most or are most efficient with our services and programs. So that's an example of what happens at the Q-Star meeting. And so as we talk about future discussions, and this one looks kind of messy, but it was something we had to figure out what we're trying to do as we move forward. One is that we did include in 15-16 that we included metrics for each offer, so that was something new for us. All these metrics have been aligned to the strategic objectives, so we now have strategy maps, and so that's a plus for us. That's something that we've improved on. The future performance discussions are focused on achieving the objectives, and I think I mentioned earlier that one of our learnings is that we really need to make those smarter. They're really vague right now and kind of big picture, and I'm trying to think of one of the words in them, but they're not really specific. They're not smart. I'll just say it that way. So that's not something else we need to look at. And then some of the linkage and interdependence between these three things is really critical for us to really start to align and put those together. So our goal-focused approach on this side is that we have our key outcomes. Another aha for us is that we don't have big picture targets. We don't have targets around each of the key outcomes about what will really make this successful. We have a couple. We have our Road to 2020 goals, for example, for environmental, are very specific, and that team is really working hard to make that real. Some of the other outcomes, not as much, so that's one of our strategies in the next 2 years. And of course, the objectives to make those smarter and to make them more specific. And there are initiatives that they can really connect on. One of the things that we did when we developed our objectives in the beginning was, we want to make sure that every offer can fit somewhere. So there are some of our objectives that are so large, so broad, that anything can fit there. So that's kind of an interesting philosophy for us, but now we're going to change that and make them more specific. So on the results side, we have a dashboard, so we do have that up and running. Really indicates performance of our key outcomes at this point. And then we have our strategy maps, and they're indicating performance of the objectives, and they're aligned with our objectives. And so that's where our results are at this point in time. It's just really pulling these together and making sure they're all talking appropriately, and just not happening yet, but we're on our way. So really in kind of closing up the conversation or my presentation is about the culture piece, and I've mentioned a couple times through is that we really had to change our culture about metrics. There's a fear around metrics. There's also a fear around being held accountable for metrics. So that's a culture shift for us at this point in time. There's also a lack of organizational knowledge, and so with that whole business acumen is something that this has raised our awareness that people don't know how to find metrics for their areas. Not everyone does. So that's something that, again, from a learning and development perspective, that we realize that's going to be an important piece. And then the other piece of the great culture is the accountability. And so when we are asking you to put numbers into your Q-stars, actual numbers and targets and misses and successes and all those kind of things, it makes you more aware. And then also at the department level too, as we get down to that third level of metrics, then that really is changing our culture. People are starting to talk more metrics and process than we had before, which is part of our improvement. So that is it. That is what I wanted to tell you about our strategic planning process. I know that we're a little short. It was about 30 minutes. I was thinking a little bit longer, but maybe I talked fast. I'm hoping that you'll have some questions. Again, we're in process, and so I'm happy to help in any way that I can. So now, Lori, do we open it up for questions, or what would be the next step?
Sure, let's open it up for questions. I actually see Julia has already a congratulations for you and a question. Julia.
Hi, Terri.
Hi.
Congratulations on your whole journey. And we love the videotape also on your journey. I think it's fabulous. A question about how did you educate all the leaders? You're talking about many leaders in different first-line supervisors, senior executives, and so forth on performance excellence. What was your process for that?
Our process for that was we did a couple of things. One, at the 2 all supervisors meetings I talked about, we started those in 2011 actually, and the kickoff was, hey, here's what performance excellence is about. Here's these criteria that we're going to start to use, and so we kicked it off at that point with all leaders in the room. So we continue to talk about that at the meetings that we have. What we've steered away from is saying that it's our Baldrige journey, and it's really more about performance excellence. It's our journey to world class, as we call it, and it's not about Baldrige. And so we continue to say this is part of our journey to world class. Our metrics implementation and really understanding metrics and how they can help us to know if we're successful or if we're lacking is part of our journey to world class. So that's how we introduce it. We also have go on the road, so to speak, and I do that every couple of years and go talk about what we have implemented in the last 5 years based on the feedback that we've gotten from the feedback reports from either Rocky Mountain Performance Excellence or now last year Baldrige, and some of the consistencies that we've seen to say here, we consistently see we do not have a systematic process improvement in place. We don't have a program for that, and so we consistently get that. We know that, and that's on our to-do list. But strategy was first. Let's get our strategic planning process down first. So now we have this beautiful marriage between strategic planning and budgeting, and so that's really a strength for us, and we've seen that in the last two feedback reports. And then, but the next piece of metrics and the connection of metrics and how do you measure and results are opportunities for improvement. So those 2 methods, one we talk about it at our all supervisors meetings, and not the entire meeting, but we always talk about something about our world-class journey. And so that's one venue, and then the other is I and some of my colleagues go out to all departments throughout the year and just talk about where we are, how far we've come, and things we put in place to make us a better organization. And that's the most telling for folks when they say, wow, we are now doing this. And one example around that is our council. When we were council onboarding in the past, it was pretty much, what do you all want? What do you want from us? What do you want from the city? And so they had hundreds of ideas. Here's what we want you to do. And we try to collect those and try to put them in order and try to make sure that those happened. And then as we put our strategic planning process in place and actually had a pretty decent strategic plan, then what we said to them was, okay, here's what we're doing. Here are all the things that we're doing as a city. Here's our plan. Here are our budget, budgeted offers. And from this, what else do you want? And then that list came down drastically. I think at the last retreat, they had maybe 25 items in addition to what we had already told them. So that process helped council understand and our staff, because it was so much less cumbersome to get their ideas, because we already had it all laid out for them in a sense, and then they got to enhance it. So then a big win for us around that was that one of our council members in this strategic planning process in this last iteration said, we want to adopt this strategic plan, and they had never done that before. So those are wins for us that really help us talk to the organization to say, this performance excellence and these good questions that we are asked in the criteria and the feedback we get really are making us a better organization. Is that helpful?
Thank you very much.
Okay, you're very welcome.
I have one more question. In your world-class journey, you recognize world-class people. How do you do that?
We have a couple of ways. We have a world-class people program, actually, where staff is able to put in an application for their colleagues. And so we usually have anywhere from 10 to 15 folks every year that we recognize as world-class based on those applications. A second thing that we do is we implemented a couple years ago an employee recognition week. And so the first week in May, we recognize employees, and we also, again, that's another opportunity for individuals and or teams to, we have an application process, and our city manager and deputy city manager look at all these applications. They had over 100 this year, and they select the top candidates, and we award them that way as well. So those are a couple of kind of organization-wide recognitions that we have, that we've implemented.
Thank you.
Before we open it up to any more questions, I want to say Julia mentioned a video earlier, and I just posted a link to that in the comments section. You can find it on YouTube. It's called FC Journey to World Class, and it really is a fantastic video, very fun look at the City of Fort Collins' journey to excellence and the measures that have been taken to achieve world-class results.
Thank you. That was fun to put together. We have made it a little whimsical.
Yeah, it's a great video. It really is.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from our listeners? So I'm sure somebody will come up with something, and in the meantime, if you do want to type anything into the chat, I can always read it off, or you can unmute your phones to ask a question. And I wanted to say we had a really great presenter from the City of Fort Collins at our Learning Summit. We had Kelly DiMartino, and she talked about the culture of the City of Fort Collins. Actually, the title of her presentation was For the Love of Culture. And what I thought was really interesting, she talked about the 3 Bs in Fort Collins: bikes, beer, and bands. And I thought that was fun because it also is sort of similar to Albuquerque, I think. We like all of those things too. So I always really appreciate hearing more about how you all are improving. And I'm sure that a lot of us, whether we work in government or not, can relate to that OFI that you got about this lack of a strategic planning process. So it sounds like you really sort of started from the beginning on this, started doing the squishy work sort of from the ground up.
Absolutely, and I think, again, in the very beginning, I talked about this, our city plan, and our city plan process that we'll have in 2017. And again, that's such a long, 50, almost to 100-year look. And so when we recognize that that's our plan, that's our strategic plan. And again, the execution of it, well, how do you execute, how do you monitor it? Those kind of questions began to come up. It's like, we don't. And so that's when we said, okay, let's develop a plan that really directly connects into our budgeting process, because at the time our budgeting process was our shining star. We really have that. It's a really robust. We include staff are included. We have what we call our budgeting for outcome teams, and so each of those 7 teams is chaired by one of our leaders, an emerging leader and or a seasoned leader. And then we use it as an opportunity for people to grow, to say, would you like to be on a BFO team? It's a lot of work, but you also learn a lot about the organization. So we have anywhere from 7 to 9 members team members on the BFO teams, and then we also added, as an improvement, 2 rounds ago, we added two citizens to that team to really help ask those hard questions about why this particular offer is important. So thank you for mentioning that, and we really do try to include a lot of different folks in the organization and also continue to improve through our feedback.
So going back to the key strategic outcomes, there are 7 of those. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how those outcomes were determined.
Yes, so the outcomes, the 7 key outcomes were determined at the first city plan experience, and I'm going to say that was 2005. And that's when the city, and this is before my time, but the city brought in consultants, and it was just that first community-wide conversation with community and council members and businesses to say, who are we, what is important to us, what is important to you as a community, what things does the city need to do well in order for you to say, hey, yeah, that's what we need from you. And that's when this group came up with these 7 key outcomes. And so from that, our budgeting for outcomes process was based around those 7 key outcomes as well. And then the strategic plan, again, that has just evolved. We've only slightly changed those. One change was this year, and was neighborhood livability and community health, and we changed it to neighborhood livability and social health, because we feel like we have some social issues that we want to make sure are on the forefront. And another one that was safety and wellness, and the council several years ago said that really should just be safety, wellness is different. So a couple of slight changes, though, since 2005 for those outcomes, and that's how those were first developed and formed.
It sounds like a lot of really good segmentation there, and that you've involved lots of different people really across the organization to kind of get this going.
Absolutely. It takes everybody, every service area, we call them service areas. And then again, what we've learned is to get out to folks, and not, one of our philosophies has changed as far as our outreach, And it was more of an in-reach before, where we want you to come to us here, where we'll have an open house, we're going to have this forum, we're going to have this webinar, we're going to have these things for you to come to us. And what we've learned is, no, we need to go out. And so this year we've even had folks go out for our budgeting process. Another way that we include the citizens in our budgeting process, and you can go to our FC.gov website right now, and it says show me the money, and any citizen can go in and they can comment on any of the budget offers that are out there. So we encourage that. But the second part of what I was saying is our CPIO folks, our community relations folks, have gone out and just kind of gone to coffee shops, or gone to the senior center, or gone to libraries, or gone to places where people hang, and just had conversations and dialogue, along with some of these more structured meetings that we have, where we ask groups to come together. And then also how we do have open houses as well, but we've done other kind of outreach where we're going out to folks versus asking them to come to us.
Wow, that's a really proactive. That's really impressive. It looks like Julia has another question. She's asking about the value of serving as an examiner.
That is a really good question. I just finished my Baldrige application as an examiner. I've been a Rocky Mountain Performance Excellence Examiner for the last 4 years, and have done different levels of that. And for me, the value is truly in understanding the criteria better, because not just how we think that we interpret it for our organization, but how do other organizations interpret that for them, and how do they fulfill that. So part of it is a little selfish when I'm reading another application and I can say, wow, this is cool. I like what they're doing here. This makes good sense. So part of the learning is about what other organizations are doing, and then the other learning for me is the criteria, and really having a deeper understanding of really what that means and how to fulfill that. For me, in this last round too, I think at the Baldrige level, the results piece just really struck an aha for me, because it's really continuing to connect back what results you're putting out there. Again, as an infant application writer, you put in what results look good. But if you're really telling your story well, from leadership all the way through process, then those results really should have been, should be part of your conversation all the way through. And so that was a good aha for me, to make sure that we are really telling our story well, and showing results in each of the 6 categories.
Wow, that's a great point. Does anyone else have questions? Any of our listeners? I think I could probably talk about this all day, but I don't want to jump in with my questions without giving our listeners a chance. So if anyone has anything, please speak up. Okay, well, I'll give you some more opportunities down the line. But the next thing that I wanted to ask you was about the city plan. So you're working on the city plan now, and you did mention that it will be an expense.
Correct.
So I'm wondering if it was hard to justify, because I know economic factors always come in. There are always people who have a hard time justifying things like that, and I was just wondering what the challenges were there.
That's a really good question. So in our budgeting process, all these teams that I talked about, they look at each offer or each budget request, and they rank it. So they're ranked against each other. And then what happens, the next step is that then they get money. They say, okay, economic health, you now have $100 million to fund all those offers that are in your list. So what happens with those offers is that there's a line. So the $100 million only goes down to the top. If you have 70 items, it only hits the top 50, let's say. So there's the above the line items that the team is recommending to our budget lead team, who is our executive team, that they be funded, and then the below the line items are important, but not as important as those above the line. So these kind of activities that you're talking about, like the Plan Fort Collins, there's a pretty pricey item. Where did it fall in line with other things, and what conversations did they have around the importance of that in really providing us an infrastructure and a vision that the city would like to have, so that we are heading in the right direction. So I wasn't in on the what we call the BLT, the budget lead team, conversations around that. What I do understand, I believe, is our budgeting process is not over yet. The BLT folks just finished their work, and now it's all coming together in a report. And what that will be at the end of this month, actually, that will go to council on September 1st, is the city manager's recommended budget. So he presents that to the city council to say, here's what we recommend, and then there are several meetings with city council pretty much around each outcome area to talk about these in more depth. And so that's when that conversation will occur. If that item ends up above the line, then the conversations with council will be to justify why is that such a valuable need, and what will that give back to us? What's the ROI? And to go backwards a little bit, in each of the budget offers or budget requests, there are sections you have to fill out for justification. What is it? Why are you doing it? Why is it important? What is the return? And then what metrics are you going to associate success towards? And then what strategic objective does it connect to? So all those things together make for the conversation. And a council in the past, that line fluctuates somewhat, and they'll say, okay, you budgeted for this city plan. I don't think that's as important as this other initiative that I want to fund. And so they have a conversation, and it ends up above the line and budgeted or not. So is that helpful?
Yes, great answer. It looks like Julia has another question. Julia, do you want to read this one out?
Terri, thanks again for joining us, and very, very informative, and I love your slides too.
Oh, good.
So the question about, again, one of our customers asked, how do you keep this alive year-round? Because usually we do strategic planning, and then we have a plan, and it's documented, and it's on the shelf. But that's certainly not what you do. So how do we, what 2 or 3 tips can you share with us to keep this alive year-round?
Really good question. So one thing that we do is around the QSAR, that quarterly service area report. And so as each of the service areas, so this is across the organization, as each of the service areas reports on their kind of their updates, their highlights, they need to be connected to the strategic plan. So any program, any initiative, anything that we do has to come back to where are you connecting it to the strategic plan. So that's one method that we use. Another, and this is interesting, just a recent example, that I facilitated a retreat for one of our water treatment teams, and as they were going over their plan, and this is at a team level. So as they were talking about it, the conversation came up about how do we connect to our strategic plan. And so now all their goals and their programs, projects are going to be connected into the strategic plan. So those are a couple of the ways, and that's again one example, one team. But each service area, all their goals are now connected somehow to one of the objectives. And so the other piece is in the metrics hierarchy that I talked about with the 3 levels. Each of those BFO outcomes at that blue level, in the middle level, is connected to an objective, and those are monitored either monthly or quarterly, depending on how the data comes in. And so those are also, that's another direct connection, because each of those metrics is also connected through strategy maps to our strategic plan. So those are the ways that we keep that alive. It's ongoing. And now council is asking the same question, which is interesting, is that, where does, it's not even asked the question, because every presentation we have, it's like, here's the initiative, here's what we're working on, here's the metric around it, and here's the objective it connects to. So that's where that continues to stay alive. And again, I think I mentioned earlier that we've also learned some of those are too vague and too open, and we need to really kind of make those more crisp and concrete. But that's how we keep it alive year-round, and it's on the forefront. It's not put on the shelf by any means.
Thank you, Terri.
I'll give everyone a moment. If you've got anything, please feel free to speak up.
We'll count to 10.
Okay. I need to add one more thing, Julia, about that, and that is we also implemented a process called quarterly QPA, quarterly performance alignment. So every employee is evaluated or has a conversation with their supervisor on a quarterly basis. So we all, as employees, each of the 2,000 of us, need to go into our talent reward system and enter our goals. And in our goals on that system, there are also our objectives for the organization. Our strategic plan objectives are there as well. So you can connect with those that way also. So that's another level. It goes down to each of us as employees, as we present our quarterly goals to our boss. It shows how they connect to the strategic plan of the organization. It's cascaded. So that's another way we do it.
Thank you.
We may have time for one more question here. Give everyone a moment to speak up. You can also use the raise your hand feature. You can use the chat box if you'd rather do that. All right, I'm not hearing any, but I have one question, Terri, a quick one, I think. I'm just wondering about the community dashboard that you have online. What's been the feedback from the community on that?
We have gotten good feedback from the community. This again was it was our Council Futures Committee, and this conversation started in 2012, and then that was up and rolling in 2013. And the community dashboard, the feedback we've gotten is very positive in that it's user friendly, it's easy. You click on the outcome, you click on the objective, it tells you what it is, why it's important. So we've gotten really good feedback about that. That's what I know at this point. I'm trying to remember anything else that we've gotten specifically. Council really loves it because they can go out in their talking sessions, talk it up sessions, and talk about it, and talk about how community members can go in and actually look and see how we are doing. Again, it's kind of a high level. There are only 8 of them out there, but we've not, and not much more than that I'm aware of. I'll have to find that out.
That's great. Well, I'm sure it'll continue to just improve and be a great resource for everybody.
Right, and it's something that we can refer back to as we're out talking to folks to say go into that and look at those results, see what we're doing. I'm not recalling any time when someone has said, hey, this measure's not very good. What are you guys doing about it? Because it's out there, the measure, why it's where it is and what we're doing about it. So that's an interesting thought. I'll have to find out from our IT folks what kind of feedback we have on that.
Well, again, I think I could talk to you about strategic planning all day, but it's about time for us to wrap up. So I'd like to wish you a lot of luck on your journey.
Thank you.
I'll be walking on eggshells too to find out about the site visit. Shoot us an email. Let us know how it's going because we are definitely impressed with your journey. And I also wanted to let our listeners know that this topic that we covered today was actually by request. We had a customer request that we do a strategic planning pep talk, and we brought in Terri as a topic expert. So I just want to put it out there that if there's anything that you need to hear as our partner and that would help you, please let us know because we are here to offer you the information that will help you the most. And our next pep talk will be on the 20th of next month, so it's always the third Tuesday. Please join us, continue to join us. If you are not sharing this among your organization, please feel free to do so. We're not placing any limits on how many of your employees can attend. We just want to share great information, and I think today we did. Thank you so much for being here, Terri. We really appreciate it.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Okay, don't forget to join us again for the next pep talk. Thanks, everyone.